What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily, and in this video, we are checking out the new Samsung Galaxy A23. Well, I guess I should say new-ish. This phone has actually been out for about a month or so now. It's not really available in the US. It's primarily an international device sold in Europe and Asia, but I still wanted to check it out. It's also not a 5G phone. There might be an A23 5G coming at some point this year. That would be a totally different device with different specs, and probably would be for the US, but we'll have to wait and see. Either way, let's see what this phone has to offer. Fortunately, it looks like I was given a head start on the unboxing process. At least I can still see that the phone is in there. And once again, we've also got this horrible, shiny, non-removable sticker here to further ruin the package. But my grumblings aside, let's get right into it. You'll notice that this A23 doesn't ship in that slim, minimal packaging like the S-series phones and some of the other new A-series devices this year. So that's your indication that we should still get a couple included accessories inside. Sliding off the sleeve, the first thing we're greeted by is a Samsung stamped packet of stuff, which holds basically just a stack of paperwork and instructions. There's no included clear case for the phone in here. Next up is the A23 itself, of course. We'll take a closer look at that in just a minute. And at the bottom of the box, we do still have a few other things. So there's a SIM ejector tool if you need it, along with a USB-A to USB-C charging cable, and Samsung's older style USB-A wall plug. This phone does now actually support up to 25-watt fast charging, so you might want to use a better, faster charging setup than this, but hey, at least you've still got these accessories included. With all that stuff out of the way, here is the Samsung Galaxy A23 once again. I obviously got mine in this all-white color. You can also get it in black, blue, and peach as well, which are all colors we've seen before on the other A-series devices this year. And pricing on this guy is going to vary a little bit based on where in the world you're located and also what configuration option you choose. But generally speaking, the A23 starts at about $230 direct from Samsung, a bit more than $250 if you opt for like the 8 gig model, but I've already seen this phone come down in price a little on places like Amazon. I think there are listings for as low as like $215 right now. So in my opinion, a lower tier device, sort of that budget category, and if you're interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, I'll leave some links down below in the video description to where you can get this phone at its cheapest current price. So physically, this new A23 kind of sort of looks like most other A-series phones from the last couple of years, with just a slight refresh to better match the rest of the 2022 lineup. And depending on which device you're coming from or comparing it to, either last year's regular A22 or the A22 5G, there might be more significant or more subtle changes. For consistency's sake, I'm going to mainly compare this A23 to last year's regular A22. The A22 5G is just a completely different device for a different market. And like I said, I think we'll see an A23 5G at some point anyway, but this regular A23 is now a slightly larger 6.6-inch device. That's the screen size corner to corner, and framing the display, we're back to a V-shaped notch, noticeable side bezels all around, and that familiar, significant bottom chin. At this size, and taking into consideration those bezels, the phone is a handful, but if you're used to any other 6.6 to 6.8-inch smartphone from Samsung, it shouldn't feel that much different. It's a stretch to reach the top and bottom, corner to corner, but most of us are used to using a device like this anyway. Around back, this phone technically has that refreshed 2022 A-series look that lines up with some of the other A-series devices, but weirdly enough, just like some of the A-series devices, the fit, finish, and overall design are all still slightly different for whatever reason. The A23 gets a shiny, glossy plastic rear housing that not only attracts a ton of fingerprints, but will likely be prone to some scratching too. And you've got kind of a plasticky color matching frame and multiple seams separating the various layers of the phone. It's a budget build for sure, and like I said, while it looks newer and more modern than say the A03s, which you can see here, it still doesn't quite line up with the likes of the A13 or the A53. The general design is the same though, but I think the build materials and finish are a little bit of a step back here. Taking a quick look around at everything else, on the left side, this phone does have dual SIM and SD card support, which is great to see, though you can actually get 64 or 128 gig storage configurations on this phone. On the right side, your usual volume buttons and power button, which does double as the fingerprint sensor. Solid placement, of course, and just quickly testing it here, it seems fairly fast and accurate. I'm not sure the fingerprint sensor tech has changed much on these A series phones when it's the power button combo, but either way, I'm just glad to see it on here. Towards the bottom, the headphone jack still remains there, the USB-C port is in the center, and a single downward facing speaker setup there as well. Earpiece slit is just above the selfie camera up front, and around back, a quad lens camera setup, which sees some changes as well, which I'll talk about in just a minute. With the display, the 6.6-inch screen on this A23 gets a bump up in resolution versus last year's regular A22, but we're back to a PLS LCD panel. It's a somewhat quirky 2408 by 1080 resolution at around 400 pixels per inch. It is still 90 Hertz, which is nice at least. You get that slightly faster, more fluid feel with your taps, touches, and swipes, though not quite as smooth as a full 120 Hertz screen. The downside here, though, is, like I said, we lose Super AMOLED, which the regular A22 had. It seems like with these A-series phones, Samsung can just never decide on what they want to commit to. Year over year, device after device, they keep flip-flopping between the high refresh rate, AMOLED versus LCD, and 720 resolution versus 1080. I guess there has to be some difference between these lower A-series phones and the upper tier ones, but at this point in 2022, even a $250 phone should have the full 90 Hz 1080 resolution AMOLED screen. That's a fair set of features, and that's what every sub $300 phone should offer. Regardless, I still think the A23 delivers a decent viewing experience for what it is. Most people are going to be happy, and it's no doubt noticeably sharper than the 720 display last year, especially at this big size. It's just not as bright or as colorful, and that's a shame. I wish Samsung would just commit to a good trifecta of display features. The out loud listening experience on this phone is also that budget setup. One single speaker at the bottom, like I mentioned, no dual stereo sound. And again, there's no reason not to just throw in a secondary earpiece speaker, even on a budget device nowadays. Still though, the single speaker setup is plenty loud. Here's a sample so you can get an idea. When it comes to the specs, the A23 I think actually gets a solid array of internals that definitely makes this phone worth it. Powering this device now is the Qualcomm Snapdragon 680 4G chipset. The option of 4, 6, or 8 gigs of RAM, and like I mentioned earlier, 64 or 128 gigs of storage, with the option to throw in an SD card. Here are the Geekbench scores for those of you who like to compare numbers, but generally speaking, the Snapdragon 680 is still a relatively new chipset, came out last fall, and it sits sort of in that better than budget ranking with its processing power. Also, the A23 does ship with the full version of Samsung One UI, not One UI Core, and already has the Android 12 and One UI 4.1 updates. So from start to finish, there's really nothing that's limited with the software or even the internal hardware. Just briefly flipping through this phone, to me it feels fairly fast and responsive for what it is, and I'm interested to see how it handles some of my day-to-day usage as I continue to test it out more. But I'll say that I'm relatively encouraged by what you get for the money, and I think its potential performance is probably a selling point for this phone based on that price point. Also, this phone packs in a fairly chunky 5,000 milliamp battery inside. That's not any bigger than previous A-series phones in its tier, but it's plenty to power through more than a day's use probably on a single charge under normal circumstances. And I actually think some folks might be able to go up to 2 full days without having to plug in if they aren't particularly heavy users. And that's always been an advantage with these lesser spec'd, bigger batteried A-series phones. Furthermore, the charging speeds have increased. Like I said, 25 watt fast charging, which isn't necessarily fast by today's standards, but faster than the 15 watt max speeds of last year. So a difference nonetheless. And all in all, aside from the lack of any wireless charging, which we never really see on any budget A-series devices, the power and battery setup here is pretty decent. Finally, with the camera setup, weirdly enough, Samsung keeps changing this hardware on their A series in a similar way to the displays. They flip-flop between better and worse, depending on the year. This time, the main lens seems to be a slightly improved 50 megapixel shooter, the wide angle drops down to a 5 megapixel lens, and the macro and depth sensors are the same 2 megapixels that we've had for years and years now. The selfie camera also, weirdly enough, seems to be a downgrade spec-wise to 8 megapixels. And inside the camera app, while we do get a nice array of shooting modes and features, it is still very limited as most budget phones are. But let me hit you with the highlights. The wide angle lens is a must-have. Night mode is here alongside some minor manual controls, slow-mo, macro for up-close pics, and panorama. You can shoot in the full 50 megapixel mode for super sharp pictures, but unfortunately video is still limited to 1080 30 FPS, and there doesn't seem to be any additional stabilization help either. So plenty to be happy about, but like I said, still a bit limited being a budget device. On the bright side, these couple of sample shots I took just to quickly test everything out actually look surprisingly good. The selfie pictures are fairly detailed, they're well balanced, they're colorful without looking overdone, certainly a lot better than what I was initially expecting. The rear camera setup is a bit more oversaturated. I don't think I'm that orange in real life, but it also captures a ton of detail, the white balance is on point. It's a relatively good looking shot, so I'm interested to see how well it might do when I go out and about and really put it to the test, but I have found the camera setup here to be a bit better than I was expecting. All in all, this new Samsung Galaxy A23 definitely has some decent specs and features for its price point. I think it's plenty powerful, the camera setup seems solid, you've got a big battery, the full Android experience, slightly refreshed design with a larger display as well, depending on where you're coming from. My biggest gripe really is the lack of an AMOLED display, but besides that, I think this is a pretty good option for sub $250, and I'm excited to continue to test it out in the coming weeks to see what it's all about. But what do you guys think? Is the A23 the device for you? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.